The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Now on that same day when Jesus had appeared to Mary Magdalene, 2 disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things, and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead of them, as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known in the breaking of the bread. This is the gospel of the Lord. Hallelujah, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Today's story, the famous walk to Emmaus. Here it is today, our 3rd Sunday of Easter, but the gospel is still telling a story from that first Easter day. 2 disciples, it says, who haven't yet seen the risen Lord that day, are walking along and they meet Jesus. Like all the Easter stories, this one is told for us. What does it mean to meet Jesus in our daily lives, in our walk of life? There's so much here, but let me suggest 2 details from the story, one from the beginning and one near the end, as helps for us today. First, you may wonder how the story in Luke 24 could even be possible. How could these 2 disciples not have recognized Jesus? They encountered the risen Christ, yet it says they didn't know who he was. And so we wonder also, how will we see him? How will we know him? Each of the four Gospels has a way of exploring this mystery of the risen Christ. Remember the story of Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of John. She didn't recognize him either until he spoke her name. Matthew's Gospel sets up the later appearance of Christ with a specific teaching back in Matthew 25. Jesus, even before his death, explains in a story about the sheep and the goats that we will encounter the risen Christ in the form of the people we help or those we ignore as we live out our lives each day. The point is, we are often blinded by our own needs and wants and desires. Then we don't see the hunger and the hurting around us. But in these others, Christ is present. So Matthew's Gospel has it. Luke 24 teaches us that Jesus can appear at any moment, so we should be on the lookout. If we are looking for a man in his mid-30s with a beard and sandals, we may need to rethink what or whom we are looking for. The gospel story finds its climax near the end when the disciples' eyes were opened. It says, when he was at table with them, and he took bread and blessed and broke it. That's when they knew it was Jesus, when the bread was broken. When the events of this dizzying weekend was still confusing for them, it was the breaking of the bread which opened their eyes. For us too, broken things can provide new revelations. Broken hopes and dreams, broken promises, a broken public health system, a broken social safety net, broken bodies, broken spirits. We know so much that is broken right now. These broken times and places can provoke new and often surprising ways of seeing anew. Like the sad and confounding walk toward Emmaus, they are places of confusion and suffering, but they can also be places where we meet Jesus. Seeing Jesus does not necessarily mean that broken things will get fixed, restored right back to their previous state. We know it doesn't always happen that way. Once the bread is broken, it stays broken. But something wondrous happens. It becomes our food. Broken bread is food that can be shared, making community out of our hunger. Broken lives are opportunities to discover once again how deep is our need for God. And even more, where our lives are broken and healed into wholeness by God's own love, we discover the place where we can share ourselves with others. In your brokenness, God may be opening you to something new, releasing a new kind of power in your life, inviting you to live a new way in the world. At least that's what I'm hoping for all of us out of this time. We are not abandoned in our brokenness. It is in brokenness that Christ has promised to be present with us and for us. And though unlike the disciples at Emmaus, we cannot now see or taste the risen Lord in the breaking of the bread of Holy Communion, nor can we run to those other gatherings of people and tell them what we have seen, we can, even in our homes, break open the Scriptures and find again the great stories of God's love and care. Where broken hearts are lifted up to God in prayer, there is Christ promised to be. He who lives to hear our soul's complaint and to help in time of need. The risen one stays with us in our homes, is present at our meals, and blesses us to be that blessing of Christ to others. We are some 6 weeks into a time of lockdown and staying homebound. But do you know it also as 3 weeks into an Easter season of risen life and promised hope. They say that fear during a pandemic can be just as contagious as a viral infection, but I say hope is contagious too. So do what you can this week to be embraced by that hope and to let hope conquer fear, not just as Christ's own resurrection conquered death. Do also this week whatever you can to share the hope that is in you. Let others catch that hope, even as we stay put. In the future, we will again lift the cup of salvation together, as we did in the past. We will again run to tell others. This word is alive among us, like a light shining in the darkness, like a flower blooming in the Easter sun. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.